Hello and welcome to Why Design, the podcast where we explore the stories behind the founders and senior leaders shaping the world of physical product development. I'm Chris Whyte, your host and founder of Kodu, a recruitment company dedicated exclusively to physical product development. Over the past decade, I've had the privilege of interviewing remarkable people in this space, and their incredible stories inspired me to create this podcast. In each episode, we dive into the journeys, insights, and lessons from founders and design leaders driving innovation in people and planet-friendly hardware. So let's get started.
Today's guest is Stefan Chmelik, founder of Sensate, a revolutionary consumer product designed to combat stress and improve well-being through sound and vibration therapy. Before Sensate, though, Stefan was a clinician, specialising in stress, anxiety, trauma, and complex disease management, an expertise that led him to develop a technology-first approach to well-being. In this episode, we explore the intersection of medicine, meditation, and hardware innovation, how Stefan went from working with patients in a clinical setting to co-founding a tech company that's now helping thousands of people worldwide. We talk about the science behind stress and vagal nerve tone, the challenge of bringing a wearable health device to market, and how fundraising, product design, and business strategy all come into play when launching a hardware startup. This is a fascinating conversation about the power of design in health and wellness, and how innovation can make well-being more accessible at scale. So let's dive in. Stefan, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Chris, thank you for asking me.
So I'm going to do my best to ramble through a brief little intro here, Stefan. So do jump in and feel free to correct me if I get any of this wrong. Stefan, you're a founder of Sensate. We'll obviously talk about that. But prior to that, you've spent kind of 30 years or so as a clinician specialising in stress, anxiety, trauma, and complex disease management. You've got some expertise in meditation as well, and breathwork, long-time meditator, breath coach, and teacher. And as I said, in 2018, you founded Sensate as co-founder and now chief science officer. We'll talk very briefly. I don't want to steal your thunder. I'll let you talk about Sensate in a moment. But in short, it's a stress-reducing consumer product designed to enhance stress resilience. So your product is a wearable device that, when placed on the user's chest, is operated via a companion app and emits a subaudible tone to help manage stress. You can probably articulate that much better than I can, but I'll get into that shortly. So yeah, today we're going to talk about kind of your entrepreneurial journey, where you came from, really, kind of from your medicine background, your meditation, how that all factors into kind of a technology business, and the lessons learned from, figuring that out. You're not a designer or an engineer kind of by training, but I imagine you feel like more of one now. And yeah, we'll talk about startup zone kind of world and fundraising, all that kind of stuff. And obviously, we're going to dive quite heavily into stress, and I think that's going to be a topic that a lot of listeners will resonate with. So yeah, well, again, welcome to the show. It's great to have you. How did I do there in terms of a little intro for you?
That's fine.
Yeah.
That lays out all the facts.
Yeah. So tell us your story then. Where did it all begin? Maybe kind of, talk around kind of your expertise in medicine and meditation, and kind of bring us up to where that kind of, where the inspiration for Sensate came from.
Sure, Chris, absolutely. So, I mean, you're right. It's not an obvious or very common combination, that of well-being, health in the natural medicine sector in particular, and technology. But it was kind of a natural thing, a natural extension of what I wanted to do, to be honest. So I guess the background is that Dad taught me and my brother to meditate at a very young age. So I've been meditating for a long time, about 50 years. And I've trained in various meditation schools and breathing techniques. And that was very much something I brought to my clinical work. So I specialized and had a particular interest in emotional states. So people with anxiety, trauma, PTSD, sleep difficulties, emotional regulation issues, etc. And the thing, in a way, that binds all of these together is that they all can have an inflammatory response. So we tend to, we do divide up, physical problems and mental emotional problems. But I think in reality, that division is quite artificial. And there are certain conditions, autoimmune conditions, etc., and modern lifestyle-based conditions, which can cause inflammation, but also certain ways of thinking can cause inflammation. And they can also cause each other. This is the thing. And there is no clear division between mind and body in that sense. And anything that affects one affects the other as well. But we all have it within our own power and ability to change how our body is working, the homeostasis, the moment by moment balance of how our body is working, particularly things like the breathing, the heartbeat, the circulation. What we find in clinical studies is that how we feel has a huge impact on how likely we are to get certain common health problems. So we can put a lot of effort into exercise. I'm not saying we shouldn't do all these things as well, right? But we can put a lot of effort into exercise and getting the right kind of sleep and eating a certain kind of diet. But if we don't also address how we're feeling within ourselves and our own personal sense of satisfaction, of meaning, of purpose, and of well-being, then the impact of anything else we do is severely limited. So I think if you're going to do one thing, if you're going to focus on only one thing, it's good to focus on your sense of meaning and purpose. And what we found in New Medicine Group over a 15-year period of examining this very closely is the nearest thing we can get for a way of measuring that is what we call vagal nerve tone. So the tone of the vagus nerve. Now I can say a little bit about the vagus nerve if you like.
Yes, please, because I imagine there's a lot of people listening that know what some of those words mean combined.
Yeah.
This is a technology podcast, usually design and technology. But this is fascinating. So fill us in. Give us the.
Well, so the vagus nerve is the largest. It's the largest and longest nerve in the body. It starts in cranial nerve 10 and passes down. There are many branches, but it passes down through the front and the back, and particularly through all the organs, right the way down to the pelvis. So it's the largest component of the autonomic nervous system, which is the part of your body that does all the stuff that needs to be done without you having to consciously think about it. So obviously, if you had to consciously think, heartbeat, gut move, breathe in, breathe out, there's no, and a million other processes that are less glamorous and less obvious. If you had to think about each one of those, then of course, you wouldn't get through the next 10 minutes. So there's the older, the more primitive, if you like, the more primordial part of your nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, handles all of that. So you don't have to think about it. The thing that's interesting about the breathing is that it's the only one that we can easily override. I mean, you can with training, change the way your gut works and change your heartbeat, etc., your heart rate variability. But anyone at any time can change their breathing just by holding their breath.
Yeah, my watch tells me to do it every hour as well.
Yeah. And so because it is a very primitive, primordial flight, fight, freeze, emergency response, this is what we tend to do in situations of tension and stress, either acute, sudden situations, or where we've been under a lot of stress from an early life or indeed a later life for a long time. So, if you think about you're trying to be less obvious to danger, you kind of make yourself small and you hold your breath. You tend to freeze. There are flight and fight options, and indeed fawn and many other options available as well. But the one that most tends to happen in a situation where we feel overwhelmed or threatened is breath holding. And this over time becomes a pattern. Yeah, it gets literally encoded into the muscles. So again, you're not thinking that you're doing this. And something that I very commonly encountered in clinic was that people were holding their breath or chronically hyperventilating without knowing that they were. Now, we could measure O2 and CO2 levels and show them that. But and my original remedy for this was to show people breathing exercises and meditation exercises. And I've been using music and vibration in clinic for a very long time. But what I really noticed over the last 15 years or so is that people's ability to interact with classical type meditation and breathing techniques has really declined amazingly over the last decade or two. So And even things like even apps that people use to try and help themselves relax and meditate. Quite often what I find is they're sort of sitting there looking at their watch, waiting for the app to finish so they can get on with the things that are important, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think the problem is a lot of this stuff is beyond words. Yeah, so our autonomic nervous system is really from the brain downwards, brainstem downwards, and it's quite primitive and it's quite primordial, but it's also very powerful. So it can override logic, and so you can tell yourself, "Oh, I'm not actually in danger. It's okay." And it's like somebody saying to you, "Oh, just relax," being one of the most annoying things that anyone can say to anyone ever. Because it's not your mind actually telling you to be tense or not relax. It's your body. So you have to work out how to speak to the body, not the logic. And that's where tone and vibration come in. These are where there's a lot of anthropological notion now that we hummed and we sung long before we talked. And that we communicated through much more resonant singing-like sounds for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. And it's worth remembering or understanding that the vagus nerve goes back about 800 million years to the first bony fish. So the vagus nerve is very old, and it's encoded, therefore, that response is encoded into our cellular structures in a deep and profound way. And you can learn how to talk to it through things like breathing and meditation, but what we know is that those are actually surprisingly difficult to do. This is what the thing that nobody ever says really about meditation is quite how difficult it is. And I think it's more difficult now because the idea of doing nothing is
I have mild
so
panic
challenging and so alien. That's right.
You go out of the house and you've left your phone at home and you have a mild state of panic. Or you just leave the room. It's like, where's my phone?
Yeah, exactly. And so technology is great, but it also has some implications as well. So I was using sound in clinic. I mean, obviously breathing and meditation and all kinds of other techniques as well. Acupuncture, herbal medicine, nutrition, counseling. But what really seemed to make the biggest difference was getting people to lie down for 10 minutes with headphones on, eyes closed, and have vibration, deep, resonant infrasound vibration passing through their body.
Okay.
That's what seemed to make the biggest difference. But I realized, we're in a upmarket Harley Street clinic. It's quite expensive to come and see us. People had to come in and make a special effort. So I had this moment of realization that really, if we could make the technology available in some shape or form easily so that consumers could use it at home, then you could start to have the kind of impact that I actually wanted to have. So the whole idea for Sensate came to me. And I realized that by putting the infrasound on the chest, you can massively miniaturize the technology, have almost the same impact via using the body as the instrument. So the Sensate device, you use it, you control it with the app. The app plays stuff you hear on headphones. The device relays low frequency sound, infrasound that you feel on the chest, which is relayed via bone conduction into the thoracic cavities. So you'll know, anyone that's got a half-decent speaker at home will know that, there's the speaker, but then there's the speaker cabinet.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, there's the bone conductor headphones, isn't there, that cyclists can wear? Well, anyone can wear them, but for cyclists, it keeps your ears free, but you can still hear the music because it's conducting through your skull.
Exactly. So our patent is, so we're the first device which uses bone conduction not for hearing. Because as you say, mostly it's open ear, for special forces, for cyclists, so people that need to hear while also having messages relayed to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
The audible quality is not especially good when you're trying to produce stuff in the audible frequency. But when you're producing information in the subaudible frequency and you're relaying it via bone conduction, then it has a fantastically strong effect. So it's human beings have found ways to make their chest resonate for tens of thousands of years, from omming and chanting and singing and dancing around a fire and prayer and meditation and mantra. These have many functions, but one function they all have is you're using the vocal cords to make the chest resonate. So Sensate is a bit like that. Is you're using an external device instead of vocal cords to make the chest resonate in harmony with what you're listening to and synchronized with what you're listening to. And the secret sauce, therefore, is the fact that it's passive. So you don't have to consciously do anything. Obviously, if you're breathing or chanting or meditating, whatever it might be, singing, you have to consciously be awake and aware and doing that. Because my experience is that people's symptoms are largely a result of being overstimulated and overwhelmed. What they actually really need is just to be able to relax and let go and allow the autonomic nervous system to go into balance, and which is what the technology lets you do.
Awesome. So you've gone from that you've had an aha moment or a light bulb moment, whatever you want to call it, where I guess, you've got this tech thing. How could we apply this on mass? So what happened next? What were the steps to, obviously you've got co-founders. I presume at this point you've never developed a handheld electronic device before. So
no, I mean I'm not, and I certainly wasn't then a product designer or an electronics engineer or anything similar. I did understand acoustics and sound. My brother's a musician and co-writes a lot of the content with me. My dad was a musician. So I have a very good understanding of the impact of sound on the body, and I was already using sound in the clinic. I just really wanted to be able to magnify our impact. And actually, I must just mention one stat that was pointed out to me the other day. Apparently, every 12 seconds, somebody somewhere in the world plays a Sensate session.
Oh, amazing!
Which is lovely, right?
I mean, what a really nice thing to know. And I saw when I was researching for the call as well, I saw that obviously you've been hugely successful fundraising, and that stat there is incredible. But you've been featured in Time magazine, or the business has.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm based in England. Anna Goodmanson, our amazing CEO, my co-founder, and about half the team are based in West Coast America, around LA. And we have CTO Massimiliano Barriola in Berlin, and we have a customer service team in Argentina. So it's a pretty distributed global company. A lot of the fundraising effort is based in America. I would love to have more forward-thinking UK or European investors, but for whatever reason, the American market or the American investors are maybe just a little bit in advance of their European counterparts, and have seen the potential in this more than the European side. The market in America obviously is big.
Absolutely, yeah.
Bigger than England, although not bigger than Europe necessarily. We do focus on the European and the American, but also the Canadian and Australian markets in particular.
Awesome. So what? Take me back to that time then when, obviously, you know about acoustics. You've got a good sense of kind of the musical, the audio side of things. But when it comes to actually creating this thing, who did you approach? How did the business come to be?
Well, I did stealth development in the clinic for a couple of years, so I needed to really establish beyond a shadow of a doubt that it did what I believed it did, and that there weren't other factors involved. So there was a good couple of years where I experimented with different form factors. I did actually,
So you designed it, did you?
Well, I did solder together a few components and make some, rather Heath Robinson bulky big things, which we used and which I experimented with.
Scared the heck out of your patients. What is this?
So the basic hypothesis was that low frequency sound could be relayed into the chest via bone conduction, and that would have an impact on things that we know are under the control of the vagus nerve, so well-being and heart rate variability and blood pressure and things of that nature. And that's what I really wanted to verify. So over a period of 18 months, 2 years, worked on hundreds of patients, experiencing this, gathering feedback, gathering data, measuring things like heart rate variability and heart rate and subjective well-being during that time. And it became pretty obvious that there was a significant measurable impact from the use of the technology. In fact, the original use case was 20 minutes, but I found that we could have basically the same impact in 10 minutes.
Oh, brilliant.
Which is the use case that we now suggest, that people use it for 10 minutes once a day.
Fantastic. And also, I want to get back into the technology bit, but that kind of 10 minutes a day, is that kind of something that people just do now as a standard, or is it when they have like a flare up of stress and anxiety?
So a lot of people, the thing about the Sensate experience is that it's actually enjoyable. So there's lots of things which we know are good for us, like cold swimming. But there's a lot of people who are never, ever going to go and jump in a cold lake. Even though theoretically it's good, right? We also know that, eating a certain amount of no more than a certain amount of calories a day is good for us, and blah, 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 blah. There are many things which we know in principle are good for us, but which are also quite unpleasant to do, or very, very difficult or challenging to do. One of the reasons I think that this works so well is it's actually really nice to do. It feels good, it's simple, it's easy, it requires no skill in a sense. You just have to let it do its thing. You don't have to do anything, you have to lie there. The biggest challenge is allowing yourself to not do anything. It's just allowing yourself to be entertained and amused while it's working its magic. So therefore, it's not difficult for people to turn it into a very positive habit. And some people do it once or even several times a day. We have people that do it 5-6 times a day. And then we have some people who do it once a week, and a few people that do it once a month. And sometimes people, don't use it for 6 months and then come back to it. A lot of people are using it for sleep, which is interesting because it was never a use case that we particularly promoted. But we did notice a lot of people saying, oh, yeah, I use it before I go to bed, and this made so much difference to my sleep. So one of the studies we ran at Goldsmiths University last year was particularly a sleep study. And we found after 14 days, on average, people were sleeping an hour longer per night.
Oh, wow.
And falling asleep in half the time. Now, I mean, I hadn't actually looked at a lot of comparative sleep studies at that point, but generally sleep studies, they're thrilled if it's like 11, 12 minutes.
Yeah.
And so to get 60 minutes is, as far as I'm aware, unprecedented. Yeah.
Yeah. That's incredible. So you've gone from obviously the early prototypes, proof of kind of that there's a viable thing that you could explore there. Were you still on your own then? Was Sensate even a name at that point?
Well, once I'd satisfied myself that it did what it said on the tin, I went out to, I think it was a Hardware Pioneers meetup.
Okay.
And I got up and said, I've got this concept. I'm looking for a CTO, chief technology officer to work with to develop it. And a guy called Jacob Skinner, who was running a company, basically a wearable technology company, said, "Oh, that sounds interesting." So we formed the first company. He was a co-founder, and his company developed the initial device. Okay. So we did drawings, we did got components together, etc. Experimented with a few different things. And the first production, we initially 3D printed a small run, 36, I think it was, and ran a trial. Because what we'd never had up until that point was an app that you run it from. So I would have a separate device or whatever that I would play the content through. But we wanted to reproduce the actual experience in the wild as much as possible. So we 3D printed a bunch. We had an app. And people used these at home for a month, and then we collected the data. And again, the data was very, very good. So it became, so we decided, okay, let's do an actual run now. And in fact, what happened was a journalist, I think, had tried it, thought it was amazing, and wrote about it in the Daily Mail. And within 24 hours, we'd had about 600 people ring up and order. So we didn't have any. We didn't have any a production device at that point. So we thought, okay, well, let's make them then. So we then went through the process of working with the factory in the UK and producing the first iteration of the design, and sold it to. I think we made 1,000 in the first run, sold those, and then we've iterated from there.
Yeah, well, and the original founding team, is that still together? Because I don't see Joe on my research.
Yeah, so Jacob Skinner exited a couple of years ago. He's running, he was running his own wearable company.
Okay, cool.
Massimiliano Bariola is the new CTO. And after Jacob left is also when Anna joined. So Anna joined as co-founder and CEO, I think in 2020 maybe. 2020, yeah, something like that. So we've been co-founders of the company since.
Okay. So how was that then in terms of that transition? Because it's deeply personal, isn't it? Creating a business, let alone a hardware business, of something that has got such tangible benefit to users, and then kind of your co-founder exits, and there's a bit of a change. How have you found that kind of transition, or is it just relatively straightforward?
Well, I think it's what you need at the time. So Jacob's technology expertise was exactly what we needed to go from MVP to actual product. And then as we started to scale, because you can hire in quite a lot of skills as well, which is what happens now. So as we started to scale, what we needed was somebody who really was a much bigger business brain than I am, and who has more experience with apps, digital media, and working in the US, all of which Anna Goodmanson has. So it's an ideal partnership in that sense. And as I'm kind of concept and daydreamer, and she raises money and worries about the business metrics. So it's a nice combination.
Yeah, that's
and then,
awesome.
Then there are other members of the extended team who work with marketing, with communications, with the technology, with things like our Facebook campaigns or whatever.
So, how big is the business kind of headcount wise now then?
Well, including not many employees, mostly people on contracts. Partly because we are a very dispersed company in different areas. And as we grow, also the kind of skills and expertise we need change. So I think this year is about consolidating and settling down. And I think what we need and what we're going to want over the next 12 to 24 months will become clearer. Well, it is clear, but we'll be able, is something that we can make much more concrete.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that's an interesting kind of thing as well in terms of the having the permanent kind of core team and then complementing that with freelancers or consultancies or contractors, so you can deal with the ebbs and flows of demands in the business.
Yeah, and we are a startup even now. I mean, we are absolutely a startup, and it's a funny old world, and especially the last year or two, where the economic climate has been vicious, really vicious. It's been difficult, both selling things and raising money. Everybody's felt insecure. People aren't spending as much. Investors, particularly in Europe, aren't investing as much.
I'm interrupting this episode to share some exciting things happening around Why Design. At the core of this podcast are the incredible design journeys my guests have been on and where they're heading. And these journeys stem from the relationships they build, the communities they're part of, and the amazing achievements that come from collaboration. So beyond the podcast, we're hosting regular online huddles and quarterly meetups in the UK, with plans underway for an annual gathering in the US. We're also running hands-on workshops both in person at makerspaces and online to connect and inspire people in physical product development. So if you'd like to join us or stay in the loop about upcoming events, sign up at teamkodu.com/events or click the link in the show notes. Now, back to the episode.
So you've got to work twice as hard to achieve half as much. And a lot of companies have gone under. And it's not always about the quality of the product. I think in our case, it's the product and the fact that it works as well as it does that has been really helpful in keeping us going, including the dedication of the astonishing team and Anna in particular, simply not allowing anything other than progress to occur.
That's great. Yeah, you need that determination.
So I think the needs of a company, particularly a startup, change. And they change as you enter different markets and as you grow and as you develop new products. We're quite focused about product development. It would be quite easy to come up with new products, but partly the device we have, we've iterated it significantly. What we have now is very different internally and functionally to what we started with, although it doesn't actually look tremendously different. Because at the end of the day, the body is the body. So the form factor has to fit in a particular place and work in a particular way. But the electronics and the transducer and the app have all developed significantly. But because it works so well, because it's not particularly broken, the temptation to simply keep on releasing new products to factor into that cycle is less for us.
Absolutely, yeah. I guess it's more of just keeping it relevant, keeping the marketing. If you've got a great product, you just need to make sure people who don't know about it can become aware of it and the benefits. So, great. So, what would you say, kind of looking back now, you've been on this journey for 10 years or so, I think, this year?
Coming up to that, yeah.
What have been some of the the key lessons or learning points that, if you had your time again, or speaking to other kind of wannabe inventors and founders, what would you pass on?
The patenting process is much harder and a lot more expensive and a lot more time consuming over a long period of time than I certainly understood or appreciated. I mean, we do have patents in EU and England and America and other places, but it's tricky. It's hard. And it takes a lot of money, and it costs a fortune. It costs so much more than I thought it would. So that's, so if you do want to patent your stuff, and you probably do if you possibly can, then you need to factor that in. It's going to cost more and take longer than you can imagine.
What's the biggest element of that? Is it the lawyers that are involved in, or is it literally fees paid to authorities?
At the end of the day, it's legal fees, because you have to be represented in different courts in different countries, and the papers need to be submitted in a particular way. I mean, you can do it yourself, or you could try to, or you could sort of do it a bit more cheaply. But obviously the possibility of making an error and then your patent being redundant is or easy for a big company wanting to get round it. Is there. I mean, I think really the purpose of patents is to make it easier and cheaper for a company to buy you than to try and copy you. Because at the end of the day, if a big company wants to do what you're doing, then they're always going to have more money than you have. But they don't necessarily want to get into a battle if the battle lines are very clearly drawn out.
Yeah, you got it.
If it and they know also that the people in the company have the expertise. So I think in a startup in particular, so much of the expertise and the goodwill is in the team that even if you acquire the patents and you acquire the brand or whatever, that doesn't mean that you can easily run the company, because so much of what that company knows, and this isn't even intentional, it's not that anybody's trying to hide anything. It's just that so much is in your head, because in a small company, you do so many jobs. Mm-hmm. Nobody has, it's not like a big corporate where people have one job and they have a team and that's it. And I think we've really noticed that actually. People, when we've tried to work with staff, with people, team members who have come from a corporate background, it's really hard for them. Yeah, because they say, well, where's my team of people to delegate to? And, where are all the, the thick written guidebooks that tell me what our policies are and what to do? And most of it's in the team's head. So, one of the things I've struggled with most is the ambition that you have for how you want the company to be, particularly when it comes to social equality, environmental sustainability, all these things. We're highly dedicated to all of those, but the reality is it's incredibly difficult for a small startup company to really fund those in the way that you would like. It's very, very difficult, and that's a huge shame, I think. I mean, our packaging is now, there's no plastic in our packaging. I think the device is 80% recycled. And we're now looking this year, we're hoping to be able to use ocean plastic in the recycling process. So, there are things we're steps, doing. Yeah. We'd like to make the very, very, it's incredibly difficult, but we'd like to make the product so it can be returned and refurbished and then given to community programs and things like, soldier vet groups in the US and the UK, because it works really. There's a lot of clinics and clinicians who have been using the tech, psychotherapists and also war vet clinics for things like PTSD. and anxiety and trauma, and getting great results. So we'd love to be able to return devices to the community to have an impact there as well. And we are doing that, and we're slowly increasing that, but it's, the rate at which we can do that is frustrating.
Is it just money that's kind of the limiting factor there, or is it another thing, maybe people, or just time?
I mean, if you have the money, you can tend to get the people as well. I mean, not automatically, because of course, if you have the money, you can also
you get the wrong people.
Well, you can go to the dark side, can't you?
Yeah,
and indeed get the wrong people. So it's having money, but it's also retaining your conscience and your ethics and your North Star. Without once the temptation is there, there's all this money. What do we do with it? So that's why it's although I think it's becoming more common, it's relatively rare for companies to have both those things: sufficient money and a really visible, clear, ethical North Star.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you've got those competing needs from the business or wants in terms of the business needs to make money in order to fuel the kind of sustainable growth, the kind of the sustainable part of the business and the wishes and the North Star. But they don't exist independently, do they?
They don't really, although the evidence for cooperation over competition is becoming harder and harder to ignore.
I'd agree with
that.
And
I think, what I like about that is that's what we need to do as communities and countries in the world. But I think it's also what we need to do in the business space. So I think consumers are more and more aware of when they're subject to greenwashing or whitewashing or pinkwashing, where a company is just jumping on an agenda because they know it's important to be seen to be doing so. I think consumers can see through this more and more easily. So I think the authenticity, really walking the walk is incredibly important now. Because actually an interesting fact that not everybody knows is Darwin never said survival of the fittest.
What did he say then?
He didn't say that. He actually said kindness and cooperation win over competition. That's actually, nobody's actually read his book, of course. It's a bit like nobody's read Einstein's special theory of relativity, but everybody quotes E equals mc squared, even though they probably couldn't tell you what the C stands for, which is a good thing because the C isn't constant actually, but that's a whole different argument.
It's the speed of light, isn't it?
It is, yes. The constant is meant to be the speed of light. Exactly. The only problem with that is the speed of light isn't constant. But it's challenging to talk about that because if you say the constant isn't constant, then the whole of physics and maths falls over. So you can't say it too loudly.
Yeah, well, that's why we have very clever scientists working at places like CERN. They can worry about that.
Their equations still rely on C being constant, and it doesn't vary.
It's constant-ish,
Yeah, constant-ish.
Around these parts, it's relatively the same.
Constant. But and I think that's what we're seeing now is actually this tension between a money-based economy which works on competition and a cooperation-based community that works much better when people cooperate. And those two things are becoming harder and harder to reconcile.
Mm-hmm. So where are you seeing good examples then of cooperation and kind of people and companies banding together for a single cause?
Yeah, I mean, you tend to see it obviously traditionally more in things like NGOs and environmental groups, etc. You're seeing it in the kind of areas where that don't really get talked about much and don't get a lot of publicity. So community action groups. Groups of people in an area banding together and growing food on allotment, and being able to survive and reduce their overheads that way. That and its equivalent exist in myriad forms all over the world. Volunteers who are cleaning up beaches of ocean plastic, and then recycling them back to companies like us, say, for instance. So there is a virtuous cycle model that does exist and can be enlarged upon. But it's because it isn't the standard model, it's always a bit trickier to do that. But I think as the more available it becomes, as it is doing, and the more clear the evidence for cooperation over competition becomes, the more this will become the standard way that things happen. I mean, the idea that women didn't have the vote 50 years ago or 100 years ago, it would seem ridiculous now, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
And there are many things, the fact that people used to be able to smoke on the back of the bus or on tube trains seems utterly surreal now. And there are many things that are equivalent to that, which in a decade will seem, we used to do that. There are many things that are at that level. Because technology isn't the only exponential curve. The human societal cultural development is outstripping human evolutionary development, and so there are a number of ways in which communities have to adapt to deal with that.
I think we could have a whole session of podcasts on all that, and then AI is going to come in at some point and probably take over the podcast itself.
Well, see, I'm not worried about AI. This is obviously something if I can digress on to AI for a moment. I mean, there's a few fundamental blockers that I don't see are resolvable that will stop AI becoming anything near like it's touted. One is the fact that the energy requirements aren't there, and indeed are going in the opposite direction of what we need to be doing. So as I understand it, AI already, which is obviously a fraction of what it's touted to be, already requires the energy consumption equivalent to the whole of Japan.
It's nuts,
The same for virtual currencies as well, right? This is why virtual currencies are never going to be the solution, because of just the ridiculous energy consumption requirements.
Yeah.
And then the other issue with AI is it's kind of probably peaked, because it developed so fast and trained so fast because it had access illegally, but it had access to everybody's data. But it's used all the data. There isn't this massive data pool for it to learn from anymore. So I think we should have every expectation that AI has, its meteoric growth has probably peaked.
Yeah, I read that somewhere as well, in terms of, you shouldn't expect the same kind of level of improvements as we've seen in the last 18 months.
Yeah. And then actually the third part is that you can't trust it, because it basically makes up what it thinks you want to hear. I mean, we did an experiment where we got it to do the job of a research assistant, gave it some questions, and it came back with these fantastic papers, answering the question in great detail and referencing everything. And then we thought, okay, that's interesting. And then we tried to look up the references, and they didn't exist. It had literally made up the authors, the articles, and the publications. It had just invented them. And we sort of said, did you invent these? They go, oh, yeah, sorry, I'll give you these ones instead. And it gave another one. And they invented those as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there is this kind of weird AI echo chamber where you basically can't trust what you're being told. But that's the internet all over, of course, isn't it?
Yeah. Cool. I mean, the way I treat it is literally like having an assistant, and you've got to assume that the assistant's not going to get it right every time. So you need to check their work and you need to give it feedback. So, but yeah, I use AI tools quite heavily in my work just to, save time. With this podcast, there's AI tools behind it when it comes to editing.
Sure. I mean, I get it.
An AI kind of assistant on my inbox, kind of filtering out the marketing emails. And
Yeah, I think as long as we regard it as a tool.
Yeah.
Not as a co-founder.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then I think that's fine. It's just a very sophisticated plow, really.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, wonderful. So, what's next then? What are you kind of most excited about with Sensate, or anything else you're involved in at the moment, Stefan? What's the future hold for you?
I hope with Sensate, the plan is to really step into and lean into our ability to impact the largest possible number of people. I do believe absolutely passionately, and this was the whole reason for Sensate, is that we can't change any of the critical issues facing the world unless we can change the way people feel about them. So, you don't destroy the things you love. Yeah, so the destruction of nature, the issues around plastic, global warming, the breakdown of relationships, the epidemic of loneliness, the epidemic of stress, all of these things are as a result of the fact that people are feeling overwhelmed and stressed and anxious because they feel so time poor. And the only way, I mean, I said to somebody the other day, Elon Musk has 24 hours in a day as well, just like you do. The only way to feel like you have more time is to be less anxious about it, to be less stressed about it. And then you learn how to prioritize. But when you're locked into this kind of cycle of panic, you do everything, you try to do everything and you do all of it badly. So if we can get people stepping back, relaxing, taking a breath, pausing, and then seeing with new eyes, then all the problems in the world are potentially changeable. So that's kind of the mission, is to try and get a critical mass of people, an island of cohesion of people that come together and form, with many, many other people doing a similar thing, form a tipping point in opposition to all the tipping points that are trying to move everything in the other direction, right?
Absolutely. And
we do that by expanding the way the product works, by making it more effective. That's really the aim. And it's already incredibly effective, but that's my obsession, is to try and make the hardware and the app work even more efficiently within a 10 or maybe less time frame, 10 minutes or less time frame. And to make it more and more enjoyable and more engaging, not in a kind of clickbaity sort of free-to-play app kind of way. So not dopamine driven, but rather feel-good driven.
Yeah.
Again, the research is incredibly clear. A sense of wonder, a sense of awe, the ability to be grateful, the ability to give to others heightens your vagal tone. And Dacher Keltner, professor of psychology at Berkeley, talks about this. This is fairly non-controversial. The fact that if you really want to enjoy yourself, then doing that through experiences which promote compassion and empathy are absolutely the way to achieve that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's bonkers to think that if you do nice things and you're a nice person and you're helpful, that good things often come as a result of it. It's certainly how I try and live my life, And
yeah, you basically feel good.
Yeah.
We tend to think that feeling good is based on one set of criteria, and then when we get those things, the job, the promotion, the health, the money, the weight, whatever it might be, we find we're no happier. So we try to get more of them. And then the other possibility is we realize, well, actually, I'm going to look at the research, which shows that those things don't make anyone happy. Some of the most miserable people I've met are billionaires. And the things that make people happy are simple lives. And we see this in, traditional communities, like whether it's native communities or Shaker, Quaker communities, and the blue zones, the areas across the world where people live in traditional communities in Sardinia and Loma Linda and Japan, where they're leading communal lives, growing food together, eating food together, spending their time outside, doing practical work. None of them are rich, and yet they all have everything they need.
That's it, yeah. It's a really lovely way to, I think, kind of wrap the episode up. That on that kind of note, it's just be kind, and be together. You don't need material stuff. You don't kind of. It's that won't make you happier, but
survival of the kindest.
Survival of the kindest. Yeah. Be kind, feel good. Yeah. Perhaps we'll do a poll out and we can get some nice kind of taglines there. But no, that's wonderful. So where can people find out about Sensate then? I know it's available on Amazon and other places, but
it is, yeah. The best place to do is go to our website. So getsensate.com. I'm sure
I'll
you
include the link in the show notes.
Yeah, getsensate.com. That's the best place. That's global. And that's where we run our deals. And there's a whole blog section there of articles that I've written, an explanation of some of the things that I've talked about today. So yeah, so go there.
Awesome. And you're on LinkedIn. I think that's how we connected. So if people want to reach out and kind of ask you questions about...
Yeah, people can reach out to me personally on LinkedIn or Facebook.
Yeah. Awesome.
There are company Facebooks and company Instagrams, but I don't tend to look at those. But I run a personal page on Facebook.
Yeah. Cool. I'll put a link there. And you mentioned a discount code as well if people are interested in trying it.
I mean, for me, it's all about people using the tech and benefiting from the tech. So we'll be thrilled to give you a code which you can give to your listeners.
I'll pop that in the show notes. I'm sure that'll be interesting to just get the feedback from the audience, the listeners as well on the product and the impact it has on those. I'm looking forward to trying it out myself. Sleep and kind of anxiety, both things that
what's not to like.
Come and go.
But we have a lot of practitioners, practitioner affiliates using it.
Yeah.
With their patients, because it's a really useful clinical tool.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. So, Stefan, thank you so much for joining me. It's been really interesting, kind of journey through your background and through Sensate, and it's been wonderful. So, thank you again.
You're so welcome.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Why Design. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave a review wherever you're listening. It really helps others discover the podcast. And while you're at it, why not share it with a friend or colleague who'd enjoy it too? If you'd like to stay connected or explore more about the work we're doing at Kodu, feel free to visit teamkodu.com or connect with me, Chris Whyte, on LinkedIn. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.